Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's Facebook Live. I'm going to talk about difficult people and dealing with those this week. If you've been celebrating Thanksgiving, you might have already experienced that this weekend, and now we've got Christmas and New Year's coming up. And it's, big family events can occur, but also nights out with colleagues and things like that. People you might have tried to avoid as well, maybe you're having to deal with them, and that can be quite, as I said in the introduction that I typed up for you, that it's quite draining. It's quite emotionally draining. It's exhausting, in fact, and it can be very stressful as well for us to have to deal with. So, particularly family members, they always seem to know exactly the right button to press, and then we can say things we regret, or we can do things we would usually say no to, all just to keep the peace. And maybe there can be situations if family members are fighting, or if colleagues are drunk or having a row, or somebody's saying something that they would not normally do. Maybe we feel we have to step in, and even though we're not involved in the original dispute, but maybe we feel somehow responsible, and that we have to step in this case, in all of those cases, whether it's family, friends, or neighbors, or work colleagues, it's actually our own toxic guilt and shame that's kicked in, and perhaps a need to control the situation. That can happen. People pleasers, codependents, are particularly prone to perfectionists. So, you have to be very, very careful, because, if you're finding that you have toxic guilt and shame, and they're an issue for you, then I would really please, say to you, go seek support from a therapist, because this can be very quickly resolved. Once, we can get to the root cause of it, and then you can resolve these issues. And, you have to be aware. There are some things you really have to be aware of. So pointers I'm going to give you now is that, unfortunately, difficult people, not everybody will, or can be reasoned with. The other thing I'd say to you is, you are not there to be anybody's punch bag, either physically or emotionally, or in any way, shape, or form. Basically, you are not there. You are not there to be their doormat and for them to walk all over you. You are not there for that. You can walk away. You are allowed to hang up on that person. You know, there are some people who will want to dump all over us the negativity that's going on in their lives, but they're never there for you. So you don't have to put up with bad behavior, basically. That's what I'm trying to say here. And there is no one size fits all with every situation. There are some techniques you can use. You need to practice them, because they won't feel natural to you. For most people, these don't feel natural. You know, an awful lot of times when we're feeling, even if we aren't, as I said, if we're not involved in a dispute, but our fright and flight response is being triggered anyway. And this is why, we're jumping in and trying to smooth the waters and control that. So when we can learn these techniques I'm going to talk about, although they won't feel natural at the start, if we practice them, it will help us to re-engage our brain and to calm and soothe ourselves. That flight and fright, that stress response down, that anxiety response down, just calm it down a little bit, so that we don't feel as threatened by these people, and we can deal with them more appropriately. So the first thing I'd say to you is, learn to take a step back. This is going to be vitally important for any of these techniques I'm going to talk about, because when we can take that mental step back, we can then start to de-escalate the situation, both internally inside us, but also maybe externally if we need to. So meditation is your best friend for this. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to go off and spend a whole lot of money on courses. If you want to, you can. You do yoga, you could do Tai Chi, you can do form of meditations. It doesn't have to be mindfulness. Mindfulness doesn't suit everybody. You know, your 7-Eleven technique is something very easy to do. There are a 3-minute breather which you can use on the go, even if you just learned that, to train yourself. But to practice it, you need to practice it during the day. Again, I've got meditations, I've got mindfulness, I've got 7-Eleven technique, the 3-minute breather. They're all on my podcast, and there is a link through this week's blog to those podcasts, so go check them out. Because as you learn to practice this meditation, it will help to slow down your brain automatically, and therefore you are better able to deal with these difficult people. It helps you to re-engage your brain when you're confronted, and that's what you're doing. You're taking this mental step back. And if you can just remember to focus on slowing your breathing down, because when we're in that flight or fright situation, we can be breathing very shallow breathing. So if you can start to take a deep breath in, but if you can try and take a deeper breath out, we're hijacking that central nervous system, we're calming ourselves down, we're calming down the brain, and we're re-engaging then the brain again in a better frame of mind. We can be in a better frame of mind to de-escalate this, all while the other person's talking. It's all, once you're practicing, you will learn to automatically take some deep breaths, take a mental step back, and then you'll be able to do all that while the person is doing it. But again, it needs to be practiced. Tip number 2 is to actually stop and listen to what's being said. You can do this while you're breathing. You just focus on your breath, few breaths to calm yourself down, and then listen to what's really being said. You know, even if we can acknowledge what's really going on for them, what the real problem is, if we can suspend our judgment for a few seconds, treat the other person with respect, an awful lot of time that's enough to, you know, they feel heard. Because they could be feeling very vulnerable, they could be feeling afraid. So if we can suspend our own judgments, if we can, you know, slow down our need to step in, our defense mechanisms just a little bit, we can maybe perhaps again de-escalate the situation. We can hear what that person really needs. What are they actually trying to say to me? Because if we don't acknowledge the real issue, then we can't support them in a healthy way. We can't help them in a healthy way. And if the person themselves doesn't feel like they're being heard and acknowledged, then the issue is not going to be resolved anyway. So try and stop and listen to what is actually being said. Sometimes too, we have to look beyond what they're actually talking about, you know, what the verbal, what they're actually saying verbally, and to actually look at the hidden meaning behind it, and to perhaps look at their body language, what's really going on here. Now, there are questions in the blog. I'll run through them very quickly, but you don't have to take them down. You can go and have a look at them in the blog. Link will be in the description. So questions you might ask: is this problem or issue about you? If you're working in a company, is it about it? Or is it about them? Is it something about them that they're having? Have you let your boundaries slide with this person? Probably is the answer there, but you'll have to investigate that even further for yourself. So next question then would be, are they triggering something in you? Mightn't have anything to do with them. This could be totally on you. You could be being triggered by a past upset. They could be subconsciously reminding you of somebody that was you know, very confrontational to you or abusive in your life in the past. So you've got to look for those triggers. Are you having a bad day? Are you feeling ill? You've got to really think about what's happening here for me. Is their body language telling me something different to what they're actually saying, their verbal communication? So does it marry? You know, is it the same? Is their verbal and their non-verbal communication the same? Sometimes it isn't. So we have to watch out for that, because what's not being said is the real issue in some cases. You know, what's the emotion around what's being said? Do they seem angry, but perhaps they're frightened or feeling vulnerable in reality? Is the person trying to gain something here? They could be trying to manipulate you. And it isn't all about confrontation. It could be a manipulation. Is the person themselves trying to avoid something? Maybe they're trying to avoid responsibility. You've got to look for the clues here, both the verbal and the non-verbal. That's really key to looking at this. Then the third point I'd say to you, the third tip I'd say to you here is to watch your own communication. How are you communicating? Again, it's again about your verbal communication, but also be aware of your own body language. You know, sometimes smiling, and we can do this when we're anxious, is going to give the wrong impression at the wrong moment in time. Particularly if somebody's very angry and you're smiling at them, they can think you're not taking them seriously enough. Perhaps think about keeping a little bit more distance if somebody's angry between you and them, because you don't know how quickly they might escalate. So be aware of, the space between you and them. Be aware that forms of touch might be misinterpreted. So people, maybe if you, particularly with a stranger, you don't know if they're you could automatically be somebody who touches somebody and just go, oh, I'm really sorry, and you just pat them gently, but that can be misinterpreted by some people. And there's also cultural differences can come in there, so please be aware of how you're communicating. So what's your phrases? Phrases such as "I understand" might not be welcome by somebody who isn't feeling heard at that moment in time. It may feel like lip service to them. So change the phrase around, tell me more so I can help you or I can support you. Tell me more. Humor is another thing you have to be very careful of in different situations. You might use humor to think, oh, I'll de-escalate this by using humor. But again, if that person's not being heard, that can backfire. So instead, ask them what is upsetting them. Ask them to explain more. If they need to vent, perhaps that's what they need to do. They need to vent. But don't shout back at them. If you shout back, you're only escalating it up. Again, though, please be aware you are not a punch bag for anybody, and that goes, verbal a punch bag. So be careful around that. But remember, raising your voice if they're shouting or trying to talk over the person instead of waiting until they take a breath and then speak, that might only escalate the situation there. So keep your voice even. If you have to keep repeating yourself, no, 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 that's fine. State the facts. Remember, but no is a full sentence and a full statement, so it requires no explanation. But if you do need to explain something, state the facts, stick to it, keep repeating yourself. Or again, if it's a work situation, tell them you'll get somebody to assist them, and then go and get help from a colleague or a manager who will support you as well. Also remember too, work situations are generally not personal. It's not about you. It's about the situation at hand, the company. So don't take it personally. Number 4, trust your gut instinct. We have to remember this. I talk a lot about the gut and how the vast majority of information we're receiving is through our gut. It's not from here down, it's more likely to be here up. So trust those gut instincts and set the boundaries. As I said, you're not anybody's punch bag, both literal and figuratively speaking. But always trust your gut instinct in a situation. So that requires you to be able to tune in, and the meditation here will help you to do that. If things are looking like they're going to escalate, again,